When I say it is my honor to speak with Matthew and Carol Newell, it truly is. Those of you that know my story know that we took our son Carter to the Family Hope Center founded by the Newells to receive his therapies. I believe in what they do, and I'm excited that they are sharing it on a wider scale in their new book, Healing Your Child's Brain. In this podcast, we'll unpack a little of the wisdom that the book holds, how you can create an empowering context for your child's life. How do you evaluate your child's unique challenges and capabilities? What do you need to know about the brain's potential? How can you not just survive this parenting experience, but embrace and find joy within it? We'll discuss all of that and more. I think this is a podcast you'll want to come back to again and again. I know the two of you, but for any of our listeners who may be unfamiliar, can you share a little bit about what brought you both to this work and maybe talk a little bit about your experience with your children?
Okay, Carol, how about you go first?
Certainly. So I started working with children with special needs because early on in my childhood, I had a cousin who was born prematurely and as a result had no vision and a lot of intellectual challenges. And I built quite a relationship with her and loved spending time with her when she was not in school. She went to a Waldorf school and lived on a Waldorf village as she got older. And it was something very special to me to have that relationship. And I spent, as soon as I was old enough, I used to go to the local organizations where they had children with special needs and worked with them. So I always had a heart for it, but I also had a heart for children. So I started my education in early childhood because I knew that it was important to know what's wellness before you delve into the children who have the challenges. So got the reference first of working with well children, but there were always children with special needs in my classroom who were mixed in with the well children. So I had experience of seeing them alongside each other and working with them. And then Matthew and I met working together in a school with young adults who had neurological challenges, and then married and had our family, and we had our challenges with our family. And it was a real blessing, actually, to already have the information that we had to be able to identify when our children were doing well and when they weren't doing well. And so that's kind of helped us with our family and helped us with the journey, helping and supporting other families as we worked with them and their children. Matthew, you want to add?
I started working in the field of exercise physiology. That was my interest. I was an athlete my whole life, wrestled in junior high school, college, played rugby, did a lot of stuff, loved exercise. So I was studying exercise physiology, and I was working in the campus clinic and started to notice kids with spinal injuries, and kids were coming in with neurological complications. And I became like, okay, this is really intriguing to me. And I shifted my major to occupational therapy. And because I wanted to really delve into the brain, it seemed much more interesting to me and much more compelling. And it felt like my heart was going in that direction. Mm-hmm. And so then I teamed up with the team at the Institutes for the Achievement of Human Potential. And Glenn Doman at that point was the leader in the field of healing the brain. And his work came from Temple Fay. And so I got a chance to work with some really capable and intelligent and really smart people. And I started at the lowest team member, but really loved what I was doing and spent my time, listening and doing the program, actually doing a lot with the kids and the young adults, and ended up running the school for young adults and really getting it into my bones, getting up every morning at 5:30 in the morning and running 3 miles and doing their neurological therapy with them, crawling on their belly to develop their pons and creeping on the hands and knees to develop their understanding and teaching them dining etiquette and all that. And before long, I was in their brain by doing it with them every day. And then, my wife and I obviously got married, and our first child was great. It did well neurologically. The second child was doing really well. And around 3.5 months, got a vaccination shot and became hurt that day, became hemiplegic, and I crossed and diverged and lost use of her right side. So within like 3-4 hours after her vaccination shot, which I thought was, an innocent thing, you're young and you don't know. And we know vaccinations are really important, but some kids get hurt by them, and mine was. So we spent the next 12 years healing her brain. And along the way, we adopted a child who's 5 months old, who was very, very hurt. And later realizing, she would have had the diagnosis of OCD and ADD, ADHD, and obsessive compulsive, more reactive, like rad, like I don't really bond with anybody and I don't really care about anybody, and you're in my way. And I'll have behaviors that will just blow up a family. And so we were able, by the grace of God, to be honest, with all the knowledge that we had, just to separate her brain from her. Here's her brain. Here's this beautiful child. How are we going to reconcile these two things? Mm-hmm. Because we don't want to blow the child up and shame the child and punish the child when a lot of the behaviors were coming from a central nervous system that wasn't happy. So we stuck together as parents, and, it took us to our knees a lot to learn new ways to get into the brain, hyperbarics and craniosacral and advanced methods of nutrition to support her brain, and other things that you learn along the way, right? You have a child, you love the child, and things that you're doing, it's good to be more effective. It's good to look at ways that you can organically, inside out, bottom up, try to support the child and stay a loving, connected couple, and not let the brain injury that the child has suffered blow you up. Mm-hmm. So we started the Family Hope Center in 2002, 20 years ago, and we have been working to expand our knowledge of how to get into the central nervous system and teach, coach, and support parents on how to do this neurological therapy. Both my kids are well. One of them took like 12 years to get it all together, read, write, and do arithmetic. She became an advanced gymnast, and she became a concert violinist, and she's a doctor of occupational therapy now. And that for us was, we can sit back and say, you know what, we were able to shepherd this child. I always say, if love would have fixed your kid, they'd all be done. But love needs an action plan that's directed to the central nervous system, and we need to stick together as a family and love each other. And if you hit a wall, go around it and figure out ways to, which is like the work that you do, is that you're helping equip parents for different ideas that are organic, that lead to a solution rather than management. Lots of us end up managing seizures or ADD or whatever the diagnosis is. We tend to see if we can fix it. And we tend to say, well, let's not try to fix it from the outside. Let's see if we can go on the inside. It might take a little longer, but you end up being a yes pathway as opposed to a delayed pathway. So that's kind of a long way around of how I got to where I am and our family. And the beginning of the Family Hope Center was our attempt to really connect deeper with families, connect deeper with the coaching. And, we love coaching and supporting families. And Carol and I have managed to surround ourselves with some really, really smart people. That's how you win. You realize what you don't do well, and you surround yourself with really smart people, and you take care of them. And
I think that's what I do.
You know what? That's there's a little bit of social IQ there, that you realize. Here's what I'm good at, and here's how I'm going to build a team. Here's how Carol and I are going to build a team that we can really look at the child as a whole person, and we're some people are all things to some people, a little bit for everybody. We're like everything for some people. Some people who really want to dig in, be at the front of the table, get connected, want to really be the centerpiece, the family of healing. Well, they can bring anybody along if they want, but we want to coach them to be neuroparents.
Neuroparents.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm coached with my finances by my accountant. I'm coached in various ways to keep the Family Hope Center running in terms of the accounts, but I want to help parents become a neuroparent. When they see their child, there's a lens that they see them that's not judgment. It's just, here's where the brain is happy. Here's where there's some complications. How can we develop those pathways in a way which the child gets to a yes, and the family wins, and the siblings win, because obviously the siblings are sad that their brother's not doing so good or their sister's not doing so good. So when they see the parent engaging and they get involved, there's this secret ingredient that's not so secret that elevates the healing. And so that's kind of what we strive to do.
I want to pause on the Family Hope Center again for another moment. For anyone who hasn't heard of the Family Hope Center, can you just talk briefly a little bit more about what it is, who it helps?
Carol?
Yeah, certainly the Family Hope Center focuses on children who have neurological challenges. So children who are struggling in any way with their development, and it's coming from the brain. We see children who also have physical challenges, and if that physical challenge has affected the brain, then also we can help with the development of that child. So some people would say, a child with spina bifida, no, that's a physical problem. And there are obviously physical elements, but it's also a neurological problem. And depending on the degree, depends on how much it's affected the brain and how much we need to help. And obviously medical doctors have to help with bladder issues or any internal issues that children have, the surgeries, those things. We're at the other end. Once the child's come out of being in the hospital, if they needed extra hospitalization, we're at that other end where, now the child is healthy enough to now need some stimulation. So we're stimulating to help the neurological development of the child. And we see the whole range of children. So we see children who, one end, have just come out of the hospital and are failure to thrive, need help with their nutrition, need help getting on a therapy plan, but going on that therapy plan very carefully and very gently because they're fragile. And how do the parents navigate what we should do? They want to do everything, but obviously we need to build up slowly and help those children gradually. All the way to the other end of the spectrum of children, which they just have a little bit of a challenge organizing themselves in school or learning in school. They're maybe a grade behind or even just struggling to keep up with the grade level work. And we're looking at that and saying, it's not just a behavior issue. The behavior often is coming out of the ability for the neurology to be in place. So they're not organized enough to stay focused enough in class, therefore they don't learn. So we're working on their focus ability, or they're just a little bit disorganized. So the information goes in a chaotic way into their brains, and they just can't keep up with the same pace as everyone else in the classroom. So we see that whole spectrum of neurological organization. Doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. It just is, whatever your child has been potentially labeled with, or maybe not a label. Parents are often looking for a label. The label doesn't bring clarity. The label, sometimes it can point you in one direction, but it doesn't bring clarity as to the development and the neurological state of the child. It sometimes gives some very important clarity in regards to this child needs a special diet, or this child needs some very specific help, because we need to watch for these potential physiological issues that might come up with the child. But in regards to the clarity of where the child is neurologically and developmentally, you could get the label of Down syndrome. That doesn't mean anything because there's such a wide range of children who have that diagnosis. Some have mild challenges and some have really, really large challenges with that.
Wow.
Matthew, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think blind, deaf, and paralyzed with a trach and a tube, where you're barely functioning, you're in a level 3 coma, all the way up to the child diagnosed with dyslexia and mild learning problems or social issues. He's super smart, super organized, can't get along with his peers, by himself all the time. That's a limbic issue. So whether it's dyslexia or dysphagia or it's autism or ADD, ADHD or OCD or RAD or attention, or any neurological complication which that child has been labeled with or unlabeled. This week we saw a couple kids who have a lot of seizures, and from a genetic issue from using sodium that's not being processed through the body. So we're working through that physiologically with a really tight nutritional protocol that our medical doctors putting together. But in the meantime, we have to heal the brain. So you have multiple pieces in play. And for us, we're not intimidated by any diagnosis. And we're certainly not intimidated when someone says, well, the doctor said my child would never walk, or the doctor said my child would always be blind. Because we have, through the parents, a process where 93% of our kids who come to us blind learn to see and recognize their parents' face within 18 months and smile. So if it's not an eye problem and it comes from the brain from a traumatic brain injury or lack of oxygen at birth or encephalitis or meningitis, we want to restore the neural pathways, and we want parents to be at the front of the table. We want to coach, support, and guide them to do that. So we're not intimidated by genetic issues. Yeah, they exist. Okay, let's get going. Let's work through that together as a team.
Well, that can be refreshing, I think, to hear.
Yeah. And Matthew mentioned a team. We know that each of us have a specialty in our areas, and we realized that how important it is to have a good team of professionals put together. So at the Family Hope Center, we have doctors, nutritionists, people who are trained in sensory development, trained in education, trained in the physical development of the child. So we're looking at every function that the child has and making sure that we're addressing all of those and in order of priority based on what the complications are that the child might be coming with.
And also at the Family Home Center, so we just were able to publish a book, and that came because we found some hours at the end of the day, the end of the weekends, and we didn't stop seeing kids. But we see kids from 6 continents in 35 different countries. We travel around the world to see kids. And some kids come to us in Philadelphia, and sometimes we go to Europe or different parts of the world to help kids and parents. Parents are our clients, as it were. We want to help the parents understand the child and develop a neuro program for the parents. And the book that we put out and the stuff that we have online is just to continue to help parents and to inform them and to help them understand this really complicated, sometimes overwhelming situation that they're just can't breathe. When my little girl got hurt and I'm holding her, it's difficult to breathe. It's difficult to get up every day. You don't really get a good night's sleep because the child down the hallway is not doing so well. But when you know what you're doing and every day is a proactive day rather than a reactive day, and you develop a plan and you know how to execute the plan, you bring people together, then you can breathe, and then you realize, okay, if I execute this along this line, I can measure this, and my child has the ability to neurologically progress. So we measure the brain. We teach it to the child, the parent. We say this strategy is going to help this part of the brain grow, so these functions will emerge. My kid's cross-eyed. Rather than cutting those eyes and putting glasses on, how do you develop the neural pathways so his eyes are straight? So
I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the eyes are governed by the brain, right? So if the brain got hurt and the eyes cross or they diverge or, you have an alternating convergence strabismus, instead of cutting the eye and putting glasses on, which is a management tool, and you're trying to change the eye, but the signal's coming from the brain. If you treat the brain, then the eyes go straight.
I thought it had something to do with your muscle. I just assumed.
Yeah, but your brain runs the muscle.
Okay.
And the cranial nerves.
Isn't that cool?
The cranial nerves
cool.
cranial nerves attached to the side of the muscles, which run the muscles.
And there's different cranial nerves come from different parts of the brain. So the ones that go side to side that allows you to scan and read quickly, they come from the pons. And the pons is governed by combat crawling. So kids that combat crawl are able to move their eyes side to side, focus, have attention, goal set, regulate, be self-motivated, control their bladder and their bowels, and sleep better at nighttime if they belly crawl. So babies that belly crawl, they rock. But if they don't, and we get them at 7 years old, and he's urinating in his bed, he can't bring his eyes together, self-regulating is difficult, not self-motivated, struggles to focus and pay attention, puts his hands over his ears, easily distracted, hyperactive.
Any one of those things or all?
Yeah, we just get them back on the belly and say, listen, we want to go back to the future. We want to go back in time, and we want to reorganize this part of your brain so that you can be well. So you don't have to be medicated with Concerta or Ritalin as a kind of amphetamine to jack up that brain, which makes you feel terrible, and you don't really have any emotional content after a little while. Why don't we heal that forever?
So you've helped close to 20,000 families of children with a wide variety of conditions, I can hear. And you've dedicated your lives to teaching others. I'm curious what you have gotten out of these experiences, and what lessons has this work taught you?
Carol?
Well, I think it's been an incredible blessing to work with families. I mean, the families that we work with are just the best. You know, they have a desire to work with their children, to help their children, and we get the privilege to come alongside them and join them in their journey. And nothing beats that. There's sadness. And when we felt that sadness, when we saw our child hurt and not knowing what the outcome would be, and but help the parents to say, yep, we don't know the outcome either. We just don't know. You don't know. We don't know. But we do know that where your child is today, we can look at it, we can measure your child, and then we can create a one step at a time process to add neurological development to your child, and we can walk alongside you and help you and guide you. And we learned very early on how important it was to be right there in with the family and helping them and guiding them. And they need that. We needed that. Parents need that. And to see them grow, many families come and they have the appearance of having it all together, but we might be able to put on that look, but we don't. We know deep down, this rattles me or this concerns me. And to get to know those families, to help them and support them. Some families are in deep shock. They're very early on in their journey, and we see them very early on. They're in deep shock, and we're helping them and watching them grow and develop. Others have been trying so many different things and are so frustrated, and they'll say to us, "You're our last chance, and we don't know what we're going to do after this." And to be able to see them also to say, you've tried a lot of things, but we're willing to come alongside you and really look at the brain and see if we can make a difference and add to what you've already done with the hard work you've already done with your child. And we're not about to give up, and we know you're not about to give up, or you wouldn't be with us. And it's just been such a privilege and such a blessing, and still is. Yeah.
Sounds gratifying.
Yeah, well said, Carol. I mean, I'm fortunate to be married to a woman who's relentless. And I would say that, and I think she would say that I was pretty relentless. We love empowering people to win. We like watching people with the light turned on in their brain and going, well, you know what? I am qualified. Because a lot of folks walk in the door, they feel 3 inches smaller than they were, last month when they walked into the doctor's office. And they said, oh, there's no hope for you, or you're a parent. What do you know? You're not an occupational therapist, physical therapist speak. But the fact is, your child better than anybody, but you just don't know what to do. So we love qualifying people and really putting them in the driver's seat and watching them grow. we love watching people empowered to take ownership, and they want to do it. Parents want to win. They want to get up every day, and that's our why. We get up every day figuring out new ways to re-engineer. If I learn something like advanced chiropractic techniques or advanced acupuncture techniques and the cranial, I will try to figure out, okay, how can I get this into this mother so she can take it home?
Aw.
So we want to reverse engineer everything and say, okay, I need to teach you this because you need to do this every day for, 45 minutes to help this child's rigidity or spasticity or whatever it is. So we like to see people win.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's our why. That's what we get to see. And we're always talking, whether we're on the way home from the car or we're cooking dinner together. We're talking about this kid we saw yesterday or this kid over here, or I'm upset about that I don't know enough about this, so I'm going to go take this class because I don't feel I'm smart enough. And I'm always doing something because I don't really feel I'm smart enough. I wish I was perfect, to be fair, Emily. But I'm not, but I wish I was. In this particular case, a lot of this, I've been doing this for 40 years, and I still feel like I got more that I want to figure out so that I can pass it on. So, and Carol's the same way.
In your book, you cover the 7 key developmental areas that contribute to how well your child functions in daily life. Can you share those with our listeners and why you chose those 7?
Carol?
So
It's always ladies first. It's so polite. I think.
Well, Matthew, I think you do. You can go ahead and start this, and then I'll add in.
Well, I mean, in terms of the 7 key areas, you really, in terms of things that if we're talking principles versus mapping the brain, the principles of the brain grows by use. The more you stimulate, the more you grow. Families are the center of all the healing. The patient, the child has to trust the healer. So the one that's in the driver's seat has to really know what they're doing and why they're doing it, and then success comes. In order to heal a child, you always have to go through the heart first. If you go right to the brain, then you don't get change. The concept that function determines structure, the more you stimulate the brain, the more it will grow, physically grow. Physiology versus pathology, meaning we want to be organic. We don't want to manage things. Cutting kids and medicating kids for these different things really doesn't get us to a yes. But if I know why this child's hyperactive or why his muscles are tight and where it's coming from the brain, then we can go through that pathway. And if we're talking about measuring the brain, we'll use the visual pathway leading to reading. We'll use the auditory pathway leading to understanding. The tactile pathway leading to fine motor skills with their sensory pathway. The mobility pathway, from crawling on your belly as a baby to creeping on your hands and knees as an infant to walking to running. Language pathway, the manual pathway, just reaching out and grabbing things and having grasp reflex to finally writing paragraphs. The language pathway from making a sound, now announcing I'm alive at the birth cry, all the way through the baby sounds and all the way into talking paragraphs with clarity. And finally, the emotional pathway, the limbic brain runs 40% of your brain. So those 7 pathways or domains, as they would call it, we measure those over 5 chunks of brain: the medulla oblongata, the pons, the midbrain, basal ganglia, the cortex, and the limbic brain. So there's kind of like 35 different permutations. There's 8 different levels of vision: auditory, tactile, mobility, language, limbic brain. And then there's 7 domains and there's 5 chunks of brain. So when you are able to measure that and see that, the child appears not as a collection of symptoms, not as a collection of disabilities, not as a collection of syndromes, not as a collection of diseases, like he's got epilepsy or he's got CP or he's got ADD or he caught it on Tuesday and we hope it goes away on Thursday. But you now see the child as a beautiful child who, for some reason, meningitis, TBI, whatever it was, he got hurt. and now I can breathe. So we have principles in play, we have measurements in play, then we have strategies that will begin to heal the brain. Does that make sense? Did I do okay with that? I mean, I
It
think
does. It does. It's a lot, but I think that that's a good summary. So, can you share how you measure? Can you share how you measure?
okay. Carol?
Yeah, so we have a developmental chart which organizes all those pathways that Matthew talked about, the vision, the auditory, and so on. So we look at each function that we should have at whatever age we're at. So even an adult, we can measure an adult, and we start right back at the very beginning, and we look at the brainstem. So whether we're measuring a young child who is in that area of the brain, and that's their primary area, and they haven't developed out of the brainstem yet, or a very hurt child who's still in the brainstem, we're looking at how does the brainstem function? What are the reflexes that the child should have, and which ones are there and integrated, and which ones are not? So we start right up at the basic area with reflexes, then we look at the fear response, and the pons is responsible for our fear and being able to do just the basic things like I see a light. I'm afraid of a sound that I'm going to call for help. I'm in danger, feeling pain, those kinds of things that pons is responsible for. Moving on to the midbrain, which becomes a lot more meaningful. So now it's not just I'm afraid of the very frightening sound or in pain, but I can start to have meaning, and I can enjoy tickling and hugging, and I can enjoy the sounds and recognize sounds in my environment and hear them to the right degree. So many children who struggle with learning challenges are struggling because they can't filter out the background sounds that are around them. All they're hearing is the background sounds, and they can't hear the teacher in the classroom. Or they're bothered, to the optimal extreme, children are bothered so much by sound, so they can't go out with other people. They can't be around in a noisy environment. They can't even sit at the meal table with the family because they're all the sounds and the cacophony of the sounds, which to most of us we filter, and we can hear the conversation going on. They can't filter out those sounds and gain meaning out of them. So we're looking at each part of the brain. Is it functioning at the level it's supposed to? Has it developed in that you can hear sounds, for example? Well, and if it's developed I can hear sounds and identify sounds in the right range. I'm hearing those sounds so that then I can meaningfully move on to be able to hear language and develop my ability to understand the words that people say. So we're looking at each part of the brain, each function that part of the brain is responsible for, and then measuring it to say, is it online? Is it where it should be? Is it fully achieved to the degree it should be? Therefore, we'll move on and look at the next function and see if that's developed. If it's not fully functional, then we mark it as nearly achieved, partially achieved, or not yet achieved. And in our book, we walk parents through that whole process that they would be able to do it by following along.
Mm-hmm.
And
our courses,
learning how to do that, and our courses,
So we don't. Well said, Carol. We don't measure symptoms; we measure functions. Mm-hmm. And when we're finished with the visual pathway, we can assign a neurological age to the visual pathway, and assign a neurological age to the auditory pathway, and the tactile pathway, and the mobility pathway, and the language pathway, and the manual pathway, and the social pathway. For instance, the other day I saw a child who was about 4 years old, and he had basically a 24-month neurological age through most of his pathways, but his emotional social pathway was a 7-month-old. And he didn't smell very well. He blew up the family, couldn't transition really well. He didn't look out for the needs of anybody except himself. He didn't regulate himself. He didn't play. He struggled, and all these things. And people say, well, he's just a naughty boy. His social pathway was really, really upside down. That, of course, that comes from the sense of smell. That's the root. So what we do is we add up all those neurological ages and we divide by 7, the 7 domains. And we say, okay, this child's final neurological age is this, and we compare it to his chronological age. So let's say he's 100 months old chronologically. He's 8 years old, basically. But his neurological age is 48 months. Well, now we realize he's only functioning at 50% of his peers. When he was 2, you couldn't tell. When he was 3, I thought, you know what? He's a little bit off. When he was 5, you start to be concerned, and he's getting all kinds of therapy. When he's 6, he doesn't really do well in school. The older he gets, the more the neurological age becomes a factor in determining what are we going to do and how assertive we're going to do in healing the child. Because you don't really see a 1-year-old sometimes unless they're hurt in mobility. You don't really see the difference yet because there's not a lot of traffic on that pathway. But as they get older, you start to see. Now, they don't get more hurt. They just get more distance from where they're supposed to. So parents go, okay, now I really have a problem because he's not going to be able to survive first grade. You know? And now, what am I going to do? Because first grade is pretty straightforward. If he gets to third grade, and I don't make a course correction here, then if I'm doing the same thing that he did from 0 to 7, and he's not catching up, I need to sort of figure this out and go searching for a new pathway that I can be a part of. And that's where we come in saying, okay, yeah, it is complicated. We're not saying all kids get well. We're not saying that we're perfect. We're not saying that kids are going to get well in 15 minutes. What we do say is that we're going to put you on the pathway, as Carol said, to wellness, and we're going to duplicate. We're going to figure out a way to measure everything so you are really clear, and then we're going to put you on a neurological strategy. But we have to measure first.
Yeah.
And then we have to apply the principles of neuroplasticity to the brain. And then every 6 months, we're going to measure again, just so we're heading in the right track. Because if you don't measure stuff, you can't manage it. If you're just like, well, you know, Billy's doing better.
Yeah.
Better how?
Yeah.
You know?
Matt is, my husband, Matt, is big on measuring everything with spreadsheets in business.
Well, it helps you develop a strategy. And if you look up one day and you realize, you know, I just put a year into this therapy program and my child is not neurologically changed. And I'm using a map that's been certified to be of high quality by mathematicians, which our chart is. It has a reliability rate of like 0.93. So it is a reliable, valid chart to measure neurodevelopment. And we're in the process of publishing it. It's like a scale. I step on the scale, I weigh 180 pounds, plus or minus a turkey dinner. If, you know, I go on a diet, I should probably use the same scale to determine whether, in fact, I'm in alignment. If I dim the lights and put on a black shirt and stand sideways, I can delude myself to thinking I've lost a lot of weight. You know, so I really need a scale that is reliable. And so our chart is a reliable scale that keeps us all honest and accountable to the neurotherapies that we're using. There's plenty of therapies out there that are nice. Okay, let's measure them. Yeah. Let's make sure that the investment, like your husband, Matt, he's an investor, but he's got to see, is the analytics working? Otherwise, why am I investing my time and money over here when it's not yielding the results that I should be yielding?
And your efforts, really.
Yeah. The efforts are.
Yeah. Okay, so you write about creating a neuro environment tailored to a unique child. What do you mean by a neuro environment? And what lessons can you share with our listeners today about how to do that?
Yeah, I think that, measuring is so important. That's starting out. So if you're measuring the functions of the brain and you're looking at it through the brain, then that's the first thing that parents need to have. And we're thrilled that this book's now out and so many parents will be able to, if nothing else, measure their child and understand their child. And if they can measure and understand, then they can, as Matthew said, they can look at the therapies that they're doing with whatever therapy they're doing and saying, am I changing my child? If you're measuring the brain, you can look at, okay, well, something's changed, but it's not really changed the foundational things that in the brain. So therefore, this therapy's either not the right thing for my child or it's not enough, and you can really look at what you're doing and measure, do I need to put more time in or do I need to change therapies? Because I've tried this for a while now and it's not making a difference. Yeah. And that way, if you're measuring the brain, you can then say, am I really changing the brain? If it's changing the brain, then it is a neurodevelopment. And, you can do all sorts of different things that can change the brain. Doing sensory input will change the brain. Auditory, there are a lot of different auditory programs that change the brain. Teaching parents to changes the brain. So just play, children develop a lot of skills through play. Many of our children really struggle with those kinds of social development. And parents who have a problem, who have children who have challenges that cannot go through those natural play, learning routines and the things that children do just naturally. Children who don't do that, then parents need a lot of coaching and guidance to know, what do I need to do so my child can still learn through play and can still, well, maybe the sensory, if you've measured your child's brain and you see that from a sensory standpoint, they hate touching things, and you realize, wait a minute, my child, how can I possibly play with my child? They don't want to touch the toys. So we need to start with sensory stimulation to change the brain so that then your child can start to naturally play more happily. Or maybe parents need to learn how to slow down because the world is just moving too quickly for that brain to keep up. Therefore, we slow down, and we do a lot of work with our parents, videotaping and filming them and teaching them how to slow down, encourage them to film themselves and watch what you're doing. And did you watch your child? Because in real time, sometimes you miss things. Those things, studies have shown parents who are coached and guided to look and see their child's responses through videotape and through the right kind of feedback, then the brain starts to change and the outcomes improve because we're looking at it through a brain lens the whole time. Yeah.
So is the neuro environment just creating an environment where you are doing the different stimulations that you just named?
Yeah, certainly it's measuring the brain first of all, and then saying, which stimulations does my child need? Don't just throw things at them that we don't know what they need. So it's choosing what they need to do. And then in addition to that, we also have mobility activities that, so we teach parents how to set up the right stimulation with the right frequency, intensity, and duration that they need. And then to set up an environment in their home where the child has an opportunity to be stimulated. Some children, obviously, parents are doing everything for them. And others, the parents are working alongside the child and doing activities, as Matthew mentioned, crawling and creeping, organizes different parts of the brain. So children who can physically move are going to be doing physical activities that are going to change the part of the brain that needs to be focused on the most. And if you have a comprehensive plan in place, the brain responds in a much more comprehensive way, and you see better results than just saying, I'm just going to do one type of stimulation. That's a start, and we always recommend starting with one thing. But once you start to address several things at the same time, they play off of each other, and you see the development come.
And from a practical standpoint, a neural environment could be what you feed your children. Like, okay, I'm going to have a sugar-free environment, or I might have a gluten-free. My child might be really thrown by gluten, or they might be really thrown by sugar, or they might be really thrown by nightshades. Tomatoes, peppers, and potatoes might, inflame his brain. Creating an environment where he's no longer constipated or he doesn't have diarrhea anymore. So that's a big problem with our hurt kids because they have issues with their digestion, which, of course, creates neurochemicals for the brain. A neural environment could be, I really got to settle on some routines for getting out the door on time in the morning and routines throughout the day. Because kids that are disorganized need much more concrete, routines. I might settle on a neural environment of how I discipline my child. The word discipline comes from to impart wisdom, and sit down with my wife. And so, okay, when this happens, what behaviors are we going to put in play to make sure that everybody in the family is respected? That could be a neural environment.
So it's your kind of like your plan of action in your home and your routines, and there's a purpose behind why you choose to put out what you do or do what you do.
It's proactive rather than reactive.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah, Matthew likes to say, I'm going to, can you work any harder? And parents say, no, I can't work any harder, not possible. And do you have any more time in the day? No, you don't have any more time in the day. So how are you going to add in stimulation? Well, you're going to work smarter. So you're going to choose how you plug things in, and you're going to know that the things that I'm doing with my child, I'm going to replace certain things that I'm doing that I'm realizing now I have a greater understanding and not setting up the best environment for their brain. So I'm going to work smarter, no, I can't work any harder.
Love it. Okay, so frequency, intensity, and duration are all matter profusely when it comes to treatment. That said, can you talk about finding some balance so that parents don't burn out? How do you, over the last 20 years at the Family Hope Center, how have you figured out to coach people in reconciling the two?
Well, I know Carol and I are obviously, we talk about our families and how to help them. And I think one way to release or to move around being burned out is to be able to really identify where in fact the brain is hurt and take the label off, which is not scientific anyway. And first say, okay, what are we looking at here? And that helps parents breathe. So they go from desperation to hope, because the brain grows. Here's our results. Here's what you can do. So they kind of feel like, okay, all right, I think that the possibility that my child can get better, doesn't blow me up. I feel better now. Number two, we get families into a really healthy routine of food and a healthy routine of therapeutic protocols. So they're not running around to this therapist, that therapist, this therapist, that therapist. They're not chasing therapists all the way around who aren't communicating and not talking. So we consolidate their day. So traveling and talking to different people and having different, sometimes conflicting therapies. OTs and PTs, we all love them. We were all them, and everybody's great. But you can get into a situation where you're going to this person for this therapy, that person with this therapy, that person over here, and they're not really communicating. And there's different, it's crazy, right?
Yeah, they can drive someone crazy.
Yeah. So we're like, okay, well, let's just take that off the table. It doesn't mean you can't get help. It just means that we measure something so you feel like you understand what you're looking at. We develop a routine in your day to support the neurology that consolidates your time. We teach you how to be effective, and we tell you that the family is the center, and you need to hug and kiss your kid. You need to hug and kiss your wife and child. So the brain doesn't grow in 15 minutes. And the frequency, intensity, and duration we manage by measuring the brain, so you're not throwing everything at the child at once. And we don't, like if you do the therapy like from 9 to 12 and then from 1 to 4, you're done. The brain says, thank you, I've got enough. And then after that, you organize the rest of the day and give the kids a bath later and read to them, put them in bed at a proper time. You have your proper time. And one of the things I say to parents is before you start the program, we really want you mothers to get fit, because our mothers will burn the candle at both ends, empty the bucket every day, and because it's in their nature. And so we encourage the fathers, look out for your wife, who happens to be the mother of your kids, and make sure she gets exercise. Make sure she does things that make her feel 16 again. Make sure she eats well. And because she's home a lot. So there's a lot of fathers that are home too. So that we really encourage parents that it's good for you to eat well and to exercise well and to have your quiet time and to date each other and to hold hands. And that this is not a dirge. This is a joyous experience that you get to actually step inside your child's brain and make a major difference. And we help them. So when they do have troubles, they can call us anytime. So being on our therapy program means they can call anytime, 24/7, no extra cost. You pay us a retainer up front, and that gets you for 6 months. So we help coach parents out of situations that are complicated. You can have a great strategy, but then the child blows it up, and you're like, okay, how do I handle this without going off on my kid? Or going off on myself, or feeling guilty, because mothers will tend to feel guilty in 15 minutes. because they want to accomplish everything, but they can't sometimes. So we help prioritize the day and prioritize and support them. So, because burning out is a common phenomenon with our parents. Nobody really understands parents or children with hurt kids unless they have a hurt kid. They say they're empathetic, and God bless them, they're empathetic and they're compassionate, but they really don't get it until, or they don't know what it's like to be, having your heart pounding 1,000 beats a minute when you're in the Costco and your child's having a sensory meltdown in aisle 5. And they don't know what it's like to pick a child up from having a seizure, at 2:00 in the morning and figure that out, or be in the hospital. So having been in their shoes and having coached thousands of parents, we're not saying it's easy to be a coach. We're not saying it's easy to be me. I'm not saying that I have it nailed down, but I'm really trying to be sensitive to how is this mother going to do this in a way that elevates herself and her family, and be sensitive to burnout is common. How do we avoid that with good exercise and good food and good strategy? And then when you start to see your kids change, you have happiness. Wow, he doesn't have any seizures anymore. Wow, he's reading at the first grade level. Wow, he can actually walk with his feet straight. Wow, he doesn't have meltdowns. So the change gives you a sense of happiness. Like, oh, I can keep going. And look, there's a measurement. Oh, look, I measured my kid. He's changing. Oh, my gosh. So that helps when you see change, not to feel burned out.
That's important, I think, that you coach people, because I think the burnout will happen. And it often happens even when people don't have a heart child, just in our society. We're always going, and stimulated constantly with all these electronics, I think. And a lot of people then end up with chronic diseases because of it, unless you slow down and start taking care of yourself. So I just want to go back a little bit to the reconciling the two of intensity and frequency and duration. Got it. And I believe that is like really important. And I love how in the book you say that, well, how does someone get, like an athlete, get really good? Well, frequency, intensity, and duration. What is it? The 10,000 hours thing. But I know that also there was another part of me that needed to just accept Carter, my son, for exactly who he was and exactly who he wasn't. And that was really helpful in my healing as well. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is, if you could, do you ever run into that, or could you speak to that at all? Like balancing, go, and do all this, but yet accept this child, the balancing between wanting to change and heal and accepting and loving this person for who they are. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think it's true. You can, as Matthew said, we can measure everything, we can organize it, we can have this long to-do list of things that we have to do with our child, and then learning how to prioritize that and look after ourselves. And we dedicate a couple of chapters in the book to that. And also, we also talk about the sadness that we have as parents. And I remember that sadness and just having to say, I cannot do some of the things that I really dreamed I'd do with my child. I wanted to be able to see my child go to museums together with me and do lots of outings and things. And I was in early childhood education, so I created a lot of great stuff for kids that I'd worked with over the years. And finger painting was not a priority. I couldn't do that kind of stuff that I thought, oh, it's so much fun to do some of this messy play. There wasn't time to do some of those things. So there's an element of sadness that you have to accept. I agree, as a mother. You have to say, I'm hurt here. I'm really sad. that the dreams that I had, the expectations I had as a mother, they're not what I thought they would be. And I have to be able to learn to put those things aside and say, I have to accept that this is where my child is today. This is the challenges my child has today. And try to live in the moment. That's challenging. Some people do that better than others. I really struggle living in the moment. I want to know what's coming next week, next year, and plan the whole thing out and be able to see where my child is going to be as well as where I'm going to be. So to look ahead and think, well, what if she can't do this? And what if she can never read? What's going to be, to accept that she can't read today. And yes, I know that could affect her for the rest of her life, but I have to accept that everything I'm doing is going to take her one step closer. But this is who she is, and we will deal with whatever the outcome is when we get to that stage. But today we can find joy in the moment and doing the best to find joy in the moment. For my personality, that was harder for me. Yeah. Matthew, when he'd take over the therapy, I'd come home and my daughter would look up at me and I'd say, how did you do today? And I'm looking at the list, the to-do list. How did you do with the to-do list? And my daughter would say to me, we did lots of hugging and kissing today. And so Matthew was good at saying, yeah, I can be really sad that all this stuff I'm trying to teach her, I can see it's just not going in. She's not getting it. She's not learning, but I can still run around and hug her and kiss her and find joy in that moment and not dwell on the sad part that's ever present. Be aware it's there, and be knowledge about what you're doing tomorrow to change that and the next day. Yeah. But your child is who they are today. Mm-hmm. That's why Matthew also said separating the brain from the child. Yeah. This is my child. And can you separate that? Mm-hmm. So it is an emotional journey, particularly I think for mothers, but fathers go through it too. We see fathers are very happy to have an understanding of their child and have something they can do proactively, because they often don't know how to connect with the hurt child. And,
you see that more often.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We do often. They will dive into work and providing for the family and become more separate from the child often, because they don't know what to do or how to be.
I want to say, I hear that in today's modern world. I want to just be I don't agree with that. That's not fair. But that's what my husband did. I mean, not that he couldn't connect with Carter, but he just dove into providing so that we could afford everything else that I was doing, all the therapies. So once I was going and set up on therapies and stuff and our plan, he just dove into being able to afford that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's important. That's certainly important. I want to validate that for fathers. They do need to be able to balance that, and often they don't know how to connect with the child. So having that greater understanding, I think, is important. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where can our listeners find out more about the Family Hope Center, and where can they buy Healing Your Child's Brain?
Okay, well, Healing Your Child's Brain is available on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Nobles. Quite a few book clubs or booksellers are selling it. So the main places where you buy books, it's right there. Mm-hmm. And we have Facebook, we have Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, and of course we have a website as well. So if you look up Family Hope Center on any of those platforms, you can connect with us there.
Mm-hmm. If you have a question or you want to talk to one of our team members, just pick up the phone. Say, I read your site. There's some information on the website, just 3 to 4 hours of our introduction to our parent training that's free.
Yeah.
And you can pick up the phone at any time and talk to Donna, our family support coordinator, and just find out, is this the right thing for you? We put a lot of information on a website for free because we realize we're all things to some people. We're intense. We agree. We want to help you. I mean, we have joy, but we are intense. So we're all things to some people. But if you want to ask questions to us and you want to talk to a team member, just call up, talk to Donna. She'll give you a broad idea about what we do. Obviously, our website, we try to be as transparent as we can to say, here's what we do, here's why we do it, here's our results, here's videotapes of kids. Here's testimonials from parents who lived it, so that you really go in with your eyes wide open. You understand us, you understand your child, and you want to engage, and we'll help you do that.
So is there anything else that you would like to say to the Brain Possible community today to be complete?
Kids can heal. The brain can heal. And when the brain heals, the family heals. And the brothers and sisters heal. And no matter how desperate that child is neurologically, the capacity for the brain to heal it's there, it's true. And if you engage the brain in a thoughtful way, in a measurable way, then it has the capacity to change over time. And that your ability as a parent is very powerful in healing. Even if you feel like you don't understand what the central nervous system does, you're overwhelmed, we urge you to just take one step. Mm-hmm. And then another one. And the first step would be, I'm just going to watch these 3 hours for free about the brain. I'm just going to sort of sit back and go, like, I know everybody told me it was hopeless. My child is 21 years old, or my child's 18. I thought that he hit his final moment and his brain's not going to grow, or my uncle has Parkinson's, or there's a stroke in my family, my father. Just breathe, and it's possible for the brain to heal, and we're here to help you do that.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Thank you. Carol, anything for you?
No, I think that it's remembering it's a process. I totally agree with Matthew, taking one step. It's a process. We can't do it all at once. We might want to, but we can't. So I always encourage parents who take our parent training, when they finish taking the parent training, don't do anything for a week. Take this time to download the information. So if you're going to read our book or go through any of our courses, take the courses and the learning one step at a time. And anything you're doing for your child, learn it first, process it, and then take one step at a time towards that healing. Because that Matthew said the brain can heal, but our book is called Healing the Brain, because it is a process of healing. It doesn't just happen. There's not a quick fix out there. If anyone finds it, please let us know. But we're not aware of any quick fix out there. It's a process that, as the child develops, that we're putting one step at a time to change our child's brain. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much to both of you for taking time out of your busy schedules on opposite ends of the country to spend time with me here today.
Well, thank you for including us in Brain Possible, because the brain is possible, right? You have the perfect name for your podcast, The Possibilities of Healing. And we appreciate you and what you're doing, and how you're putting a lot of things together and resources together for families so they can make informed, wise, intelligent, thoughtful, proactive decisions with the family members that they adore, and they want to be part of that healing. So congrats for what you're doing also.
Oh, thank
Yes,
you.
thank you.
I hope that you enjoyed our conversation today and that you learned something new. Do you have a question for Matthew or Carol Newell? Are you thinking about picking up the book? If so, we would love to hear what stood out to you in today's episode. Email us at info@thebrainpossible.com. Be sure to subscribe, follow, and share our podcast if that feels true for you. You may also consider visiting our website, thebrainpossible.com, for more information on stories, therapies, and products that we think that you will love, and to help add to your neuro environment at home. As always, thank you for spending your precious time with us at The Brain Possible. See you next Thursday, and be well.